3 cart loads of compost and several hours of digging later, and we've gotten to this point. You may be wondering why all of our bulbs are lined out on this side of the string and there's nothing in this strip here. Eventually, we're going to put in a row of shrubs, low-growing shrubs, on this back section of the bed for several reasons. This will provide a good backdrop for our spring bulbs, and later when we put in annual flowers later in the season, it'll provide a nice green backdrop for that. It will also provide a good screen so that you will not be able to see underneath the deck here. It's not a very attractive site, and by putting in low shrubbery, that'll block off this plus provide the background. We're going to have to be careful in our selection of plants. We need something that stays low and can be easily clipped. That dwarf Japanese holly we showed earlier, or one of the smaller types of euonymus, is probably just what we need, but we'll get to that later. Now, after you've gotten your bulbs home, you need to get them arranged in your bed. We've got a fairly large bed here. When you buy your bulbs, make certain to make a note of what kind they are, number one, and also their height and their time of blooming. You want to arrange your bulbs so that you don't have all of the tulips in one end and all of the daffodils in the other. That way you'll get a big bunch of bloom here followed by a big bunch of bloom there. Scatter your tulips out over the length of the bed, same way with your other bulbs. This way you'll get bloom throughout the bed, throughout the season. Also, make certain to have your taller bulbs in the back so that they don't get in the way of anything behind them. Have your taller bulbs in the back, your shorter ones like the crocus in front. That way no one tries to upstage each other. You can get to and see everything. One point on selecting bulbs, which we didn't mention earlier, is when you're buying daffodils, very often you'll see reference or hear about double-nosed bulbs. And what this means is that the bulb has developed 2 bulbs instead of just 1. Now these are basically, you're getting 2 for the price of 1. This one here is a 4-nosed bulb. You have 4 bulbs all connected at the base. Now these larger bulbs and several nosed bulbs are a premium bulb, and you should expect to pay a premium price. But like the larger tulip bulbs, they are definitely worth the extra money. Keep in mind when you're selecting your bulbs, be looking for size and for the time of season. Also keep in mind the relative size of the flowers as it will determine the number of bulbs that you want to get. Now 5 tulips or 5 daffodils make a sizable clump. It looks good, but 5 of these little tiny species crocus in a bed this size are totally lost. So you need to keep a sense of scale and keep that in mind when you're buying the bulbs. For the crocus, you're going to need more in the order of 20 to 25 bulbs in a grouping to make a good enough statement and splash of color to really be noticeable. 5 is probably about the minimum for your larger bulbs. You can make a moderate grouping with 4. By the time you get down to 3 bulbs, especially with a bed this size, there just isn't enough color there to really be in the proper scale. 5 is the minimum. Larger numbers work fine. You just have a larger splash of color. When you're laying them out, don't just put them in squares next to each other, having little blocks of color. It's best if you can try and imagine kind of sweeps of color. Have them in odd shapes and in curving shapes. It's probably best You can try working it out on paper. I have trouble visualizing a flower bed just looking at it on paper. What I like to do is what I've done here, is get the bulbs and set them out in their groupings. This way I can step back and look, make certain that I've gotten all the tulips, all the hyacinths and the daffodils spread out. I can double check with the variety descriptions that we picked up with the bulbs, make certain that the heights aren't going to conflict. It's much easier for me to visualize it this way, and I can make rearrangements before I actually get around to planting. Now you'll notice I have bare spots left in here every once in a while, and this is on purpose. We'll be coming in next spring and putting in some pansies in these bare spots. Pansies are a very hardy flowering plant that we can fill in. They'll provide flowers that will complement our spring flowering bulbs. And that's what these bare spaces are for. Now our crocus are in front. They'll be blooming first. As they start going by, we'll begin to interplant with some summer flowering annual flowers, such as your vinca, your periwinkle, marigolds. And as the rest of the spring flowering bulbs go by, we'll also be interplanting them. So over a course of time, this garden will be phasing from a spring flowering bulb garden, gradually coming into a summer flowering annual garden. So we can have color in this bed all year, not just spring. By selecting the bulbs with a wide variety of seasons, we can have all through the spring, and then by interplanting with the summer flowering shrubs, we can continue that color into the summer. Now for fertilization, our bed here has been prepared with quite a bit of compost, so we're not going to worry about putting any fertilizer in here. Our soil is also very high in phosphorus. Traditionally, you will see high phosphorus fertilizers like bone meal or superphosphate sold along with bulbs. Usually if you need that fertilizer, you will dig the hole, put a teaspoon or a tablespoon into the bottom of the hole, dig that in, and then put the bulb on top of that, and then cover up with the soil. Now the rule of thumb is to plant them 3 times their diameter deep and then cover them with soil. These bulbs will be developing roots and getting a chilling requirement over the winter, so the next spring they'll be established. The earlier you can get these in, the better. We're going to start planting with our tulips at this end. If you look at their little information sheet, it says 4 inches down to the top of the bulb, and that's very important that we get them at the proper depth. If they're too shallow or too deep, they may not grow properly. Well, it looks like I've got my work cut out for me here, so while I get this done, you be thinking about what spring flowering bulbs you're going to need and get your bed ready and get planting this fall for color for next spring.